welcome back to the Daily Dive. Today on the show, we're chatting with Oliver Friesen, CEO of Goldline Resources. Goldline is a mineral exploration company actively involved in the exploration of its precious metal-focused portfolio in Idaho and British Columbia. Oliver, welcome to the dive.
Hi, thanks for having me.
So, Oliver, what excites you about gold mining in Idaho?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Most of the work that I've done in the last couple of years has been focused on sort of Northwest British Columbia, some of the more remote parts of the world. And one of the reasons that we've sort of decided to switch focus with Goldline and go to Idaho, well, there's multiple reasons. First one being that most of the projects that we're working now, you can drive there. You can drive to the projects by road, which obviously decreases your exploration costs significantly. And more importantly, in Idaho, it's one of the most pro mining states in the entire United States. So obviously, you go to a place where people actually want to see development happen. They want to see projects pushing forward. And Idaho is a great place for that. Idaho, I think it was in 2019, they were rated top 10 in the world for mining jurisdictions, which sort of, essentially thrust them onto the kind of the global scale there. And people, looked at Idaho as a place that they need to be going. And I think one thing that really kind of takes the point home for Idaho is the fact that there's just so many development projects happening there. So you go to a lot of different jurisdictions in the world, and you might have, 10, 15 exploration companies for every development company. Essentially, which means that there's, the chance to push a project through development are quite low. But the difference is in Idaho, I would say there's probably more development stories right now than there are exploration stories. So obviously that's a huge sort of, feather in the cap of Idaho, showing that, projects companies can not only, make mineral discoveries in Idaho, but also they can actually push them forward through to development.
So, something we hear surrounding Idaho is the word oxide. Can you explain why this is relevant to those of us new to mining?
Yeah, that's a really interesting point you bring up. The one thing that kind of makes Idaho unique compared to a lot of other jurisdictions is the lack of glaciation that's gone on over the last sort of tens of thousands of years. So what that means is instead of terrains like in Northwest British Columbia or Quebec or Ontario where there's been recent glaciation that have sort of taken off the top layer of bedrock and soil, in Idaho that's not the case. So what that means is that the mineralization that you find at surface has had time to oxidize. And the reason that's really important is because when you're actually, pushing these projects through to development, one of the big things that kind of plays a factor is what is called metallurgy, which is sort of the ability to actually extract the gold from the ground and from the rock. So when you're dealing with oxide deposits, it actually essentially decreases your sort of metallurgical cost significantly, and essentially just lowers the bar for the grades that you need to actually be economic. So in Idaho and specifically on our Robber Gulch property, the rocks that we're looking at have all been oxidized, at least down to depths that we've seen so far. So what that means is that, the grades that we need to eventually be economic one day would be a lot lower than if they were sulfide. So for instance, a good sort of example of this is Liberty Gold Black Pine, who's about 90 kilometers east to us in essentially the same geological formation as Goldline. They're dealing with oxide gold. So what that means is they're drilling intercepts that are, kind of typically between half a gram gold to 1 gram per ton gold. And those are going to be quite economic once they kind of factor everything into their mining plan because how simple the metallurgy is. So what they're going to do is they're going to extract the rock and essentially put it onto big heap leach pads. And then you essentially, you can extract 80% of the gold without doing any additional metallurgy. So the cost to obviously extract and produce gold are quite low. In Nevada and Idaho, where most deposits are oxide gold, you can be looking at, mines with head grades 0.3, 0.4, 0.5 grams per ton, which obviously sounds quite low, but considering how easy it is to extract the gold, that makes a huge difference. You kind of put that into comparison with some of the projects, elsewhere in the world, especially in the northern parts of Canada. You need at least, I would say, probably 1 gram, 2 grams, 3 grams for an open pit deposit to actually make sense because most of the gold most of it will be sulfide.
Okay, so you mentioned the Robber Gulch project. I hear Goldline has just finished phase 1 of trenching on the project. Can you walk us through what trenching means and what Goldline has specifically accomplished here?
Yeah, for sure. So Robber Gulch, I'll just sort of back up here. It's a project that we optioned from EMX Royalties back in April. And the project's really interesting because the only historic work program was completed in the 80s. And that was at a time where sort of the understanding of Carlin type systems and deposits was a lot more limited than what it is now. At the time, the sort of mandate was to what they described as see a jasperoid, drill a jasperoid. And what jasperoid is it's sort of an alteration mineral that's associated with these deposits. So back in the 80s and 90s, before they really understood these systems, companies would essentially, they would see outcropping jasperoid bodies, which means that you were close to a Carlin type system, and they would just set up a drill and essentially drill on top of those. With the sort of the literature now and what we know about these systems, those jasperoid bodies are typically distal to the main deposits. So what we did when we acquired the properties, we said, okay, that's great because there has been historic drilling, but very limited and sort of, as I've mentioned, in these jasperoid bodies. So we came in and we did some extensive geochemical sampling programs to sort of get a better understanding of where we thought the actual system was. And funny enough, when we got the results back from our phase 1 and phase 2 geochemical sampling programs, we realized that the main anomalies were actually, sort of set away from where the actual historic drilling was done. So essentially that changed our sort of target location from where they were drilling historically to sort of these big geochemical anomalies that we identified that were outboard of those main historic drill holes. So what that means is that we have essentially at surface gold mineralization that we wanted to sort of follow up on. And before we got the drill onto the property and commenced our first phase 1 drill program, we wanted to do some trenching to get a better idea of what we were actually seeing below sort of the upper layer of organics. And so what we did is we came in there with a pretty extensive 700-meter trenching program. And what that means is we took an excavator and we essentially scrape off the top a couple feet of what is typically kind of just loose gravel and soil to expose the bedrock. And what this does is it actually gives us a really good understanding of what the actual bedrock geology is below our geochemical anomaly. And the reason that's really significant for the company is because those trenches essentially act as drill holes. Essentially, the way we view them as geologists and at the company is that trench acts as a horizontal drill hole at surface. So it may not seem like it's drilling being done, but essentially the significance of it is that it's very similar to a drilling program, and it gives us a really good understanding of what we're seeing in terms of the alteration, the mineralization, and obviously the gold grades that are at surface. And what we're going to do is we're going to take these results, which we expect to have in hand in the next few weeks here, and then what we'll do is we'll sort of plan our drill program based on what we're seeing within the trenching results. So it's really significant for the company because it's sort of the next step that we needed to take to advance this property to the drill ready stage. And as I mentioned, the results are going to be in hand in the next couple of weeks here. And then immediately following that, we're going to be moving to our phase 1 drilling program, which should start early December 2020.
Okay, so what's your general argument for owning gold?
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of it's one of those ones where everyone's kind of got their opinion on gold, and I don't class myself as sort of what they consider a gold bug, which is someone who just thinks gold is always going up. I'm a little more realistic about the reasons to actually hold gold. But obviously, in this sort of current climate, there's been a lot of changes in the world, and the big thing that's sort of underarching the price of gold right now is the amount of sort of monetary stimulus and money printing just in general that's kind of gone on worldwide. And obviously, gold, sort of the main reason people hold gold is it's sort of a hedge on inflation. And I think here right now with the amount of printing that's going on, and my understanding is that the US is going to approve another stimulus package within the next couple of weeks here. The amount of money that's been printed and put into circulation, not only in the US, but essentially in almost every country in the world right now is pretty astronomical. And it's the setup for gold here at, as I mentioned, I'm a little more realistic, but even me with the current climate, the sort of the reason to hold gold right now is as good as it's ever been. Once all this, money printing really kind of takes hold here and inflation starts to run wild, I think people that are holding gold which is going to be a better store of wealth. They're going to be really quite happy.
Okay, so Oliver, let's finish off with a little something fun we like to do with mining CEOs. Do you care to offer a prediction on where you see the price of gold heading by the end of the year?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I'm a geologist by trade, so I try not to dabble too much in price predictions in finance. Our kind of mandate at Goldline is to hopefully find properties and eventually that we can develop and produce and be successful with a lot lower price of gold. With that being said, obviously the price of gold going up definitely benefits us and is great for the industry as a whole. In terms of an actual prediction, as I mentioned, I think the setup for gold here is excellent. My gold will be the thing over. In terms of sort of where the gold price is going to sit at the end of the year here, it's anyone's guess. I try to listen to a lot of podcasts and people who know more about these type of things and the macro environments to kind of get a better idea of where it's going to land. And the general consensus that I've sort of gotten is that, there's might be a bit of sort of short-term uncertainty here with sort of how the election plays out. But most people seem to be bullish on gold heading into 2021. So with that being said, I mean, gold, I personally would see it, hovering around that maybe $2,000 range at the end of the year. And then, as I mentioned, the next 3 to 5 years here, I'm extremely bullish on gold. So who knows how high it's going to go? I mean, you get some guys who say $10,000, $20,000. I would never say that. I just know that the price of gold is going to be higher in 3 to 5 years than what it is now. And I personally think that at the end of the year, we're probably going to be looking at around $2,000 gold prices. But I will just, add the disclaimer that I am a geologist. I focus on exploration and trying to find mines. So, take my opinion with a grain of salt, I guess.
It's just a prediction.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
Okay, well, thank you so much for joining us today on The Dive, Oliver.
Okay, appreciate it.
And for our viewers at home, don't forget to like and subscribe. I'll see you next time on The Dive.